Okay, so today we're going to do the sugya of Chamar Medina. When are you allowed to use beer, grape juice, wine, well, wine we know, coffee, Coke, orange juice, whiskey? What could I use for Kiddush? What could I use for Havdala? Let's get started. Okay, so there's a Gemara in Pesachim, Kuf Zayin, Amud Beis. It discusses a sugya, a story really, where a Meimar, he shows up to some city and there's no wine. He goes to sleep hungry that night without making Havdala ala kos. The next morning, he actually gets some wine and he makes Havdala. The following year, he shows up to the city again and he goes, and once again, he asks for wine for Havdala. And there is no wine. And they say, but we have beer. Oh, you got beer? Okay, well that beer, Chamar Medina. That is the wine of the place. That is your wine. That's the wine of that country. And he made Havdala, and then he was able to eat. So we see from that Gemara, from the story of a Meimar, that one could make Havdala on beer if it is the Chamar Medina, whatever that is. The Rashbam explains that if there's no wine, you're allowed to make Havdala on beer, but not on water. Now our challenge is going to be, there's going to be quite a bit of things in between beer and water, but as the Rashbam says, you can make Havdala on that beer, but you cannot make Havdala on water. Does this work for Kiddush as well? Or is this just the din of Havdala? As we know, really Havdala is like the Kiddush, or of ending Shabbos, or in a way maybe the opposite of Kiddush. Kiddush is what sanctifies the Shabbos and transitions from not Shabbos to Shabbos. And Havdala is, so to speak, the Kiddush that transitions from Shabbos to not Shabbos. Can this be done for Kiddush as well? The Rambam says no. The Rambam says this is just a din specific to Havdala, and this halacha of Chamar Medina is not applicable to Kiddush. Zak the Rosh says yes, you could apply this concept of using Chamar Medina in the replacement of wine when there is no wine available. And you could actually make Kiddush on beer and shar mashkin and other drinks, but once again, except for water. Water does not count. So the Rosh allows us to do this for Kiddush as well. And he says it's not only beer, it's also shar mashkin. But is there a specific criteria to qualify? Let's find out. Because once again, the Gemara said clearly, a Meimar was only allowing this beer to count. For Havdala, he said, oh, it's Chamar Medina. Then it counts. So the Shulchan Aruch, Siman Reish Ayin Beis, you actually have a listed Ayin Reish Beis, because of the Siman Ra, we don't have hunger, Reish Ayin Beis. Sifkat and Tes tells us that something a little surprising. The Mechaber paskins not like the Rambam. The Sephardi Mechaber jumps camp away from the Rambam and goes with the Rosh and says you're allowed to use Chamar Medina for Kiddush as well. However, one point to make note, he says that b'makom you could use beer and other drinks if yayin einoi matzai. Yayin, wine is not found. Wine is not around. We're going to have to figure out, what does that mean, wine is not around? He also adds that on Friday night, on Leil Shabbos, if you do not have wine, instead of going for Chamar Medina, it is better to make Kiddush on the lechem, on the bread, on the challah. Why? Because challah is more chashuv than wine, than the Chamar Medina. However, during the daytime, when you have the choice between Chamar Medina and Challah, you're going to make the Kiddush on Chamar Medina. Why? What's the difference? Why on Friday night will you make Kiddush on the Chamar Medina, whereas by Shabbos day you will make Kiddush on opposite? Why on Friday night will you make Kiddush on the Challah, whereas Shabbos day you'll make on Chamar Medina? The answer is be'etzim, the Challah is more chashuv, and the Challah should take precedence, and Kiddush should be made on Challah above Chamar Medina. However, by Shabbos day, since the Kiddush has no extras, the etzim Kiddush is just the Hagafen. And, I've seen actually people make such a Kiddush without the Chamar Medina, so also Shabbos, without the Zochar Seyom Shabbos, and just make the Hagafen. That actually counts as Kiddush. So if you're just going to make the Hamoitzi and eat the Challah, it will not be recognizable to anybody that this is a special meal, that any Kiddush has happened whatsoever. It just looks like somebody washing and eating bread. Therefore, when it comes to the daytime Kiddush, that needs something else. You have to start it with a cup of wine. You have to start it with maybe a Chamar Medina, because that shows that you're doing something to show chashivas to the meal. Yes, you might normally take whatever types of drinks we're going to discuss during the meal, but to start the meal with it, that's a Kiddush. That's showing that this meal isn't stam. This meal is chashiv. Okay. So we see from the Machaber that you're allowed to use Chamar Medina for Kiddush as well. And the Ramah says, and that's actually the minhag. The minhag is like the Rosh, that we do use Chamar Medina for Kiddush b'makom she'ein yain matzai. Now, Zak the Mishnah Berurah says, and Paskins, that once again, if wine is not available, you make Kiddush, you use the Chamar Medina. But if wine is available, you have to make Kiddush on the wine. Do not pass up the wine to make Kiddush on Chamar Medina. There's another Shulchan Aruch that's Reish Peites Sifkat and Beis. It's more focused on the Shabbos day meal, and it says pretty much the same thing. You can make Kiddush on Shecher on beer when there is no wine available. There's a third Shulchan Aruch. This one is when we're discussing Havdala. Shulchan Aruch Reish Tzadi Vav. It says by Havdala, you can make Havdala on beer if it is the Chamar Medina. So if beer qualifies as the Chamar Medina, we have the Psak from the Shulchan Aruch that you could say Havdala on it. And the Ramah says something which is maybe a little surprising. If you have the choice between Yain Pogum, which is wine that, let's say, somebody already drank from the cup, or beer, which is Chamar Medina, you're better off making Havdala on Yain Pogum than on beer, the Chamar Medina. So even though the Ramah allows you to make Kiddush on Chamar Medina, the Ramah still says there's a preference of wine, even if it's Pogum. And we know making Kiddush on Yain Pogum is a b'diavad. So you see from the Ramah that Chamar Medina is certainly a b'diavad, because the b'diavad of Yain Pogum takes precedence over the b'diavad of Chamar Medina. So the Ramah clearly holds that Chamar Medina is a b'diavad. The Ramah, however, does add something interesting. Then on Matzah Pesach, the minhag is to make, or was, to make Havdala on beer, because it's chaviv. It's, now you haven't had a beer for 8 days. How do you go on without having a beer for 8 days? So it's so chaviv to you. You want that beer, you didn't have it for over Pesach. So then the minhag is, it's based on the chavivas, to make Havdala on beer. And I guess it's not really even a b'diavad in that situation. The Gra adds, the Gra would make Havdala on beer on Matzah Pesach. And it was also a little bit of a hecker to break from non-Chametz Pesach to Chametz after Pesach. That's an additional reason of the Gra of the Vilna Gaon. The Mishnah Berurah says Once again, that if wine is available, you have to make Havdala on wine. The Bir Halacha says, based on the minhag of making Havdala on beer based on the Chavivas, on the Matzah Pesach, based on the Chavivas, that there's a general concept that you're allowed to use beer to make Havdala if it is more chaviv for you. So if your feeling is, based on the Bir Halacha, if you're assuming that it's Chamar Medina, I'm not discussing it if it is, let's take for granted that it's Chamar Medina. So Zak, the Bir Halacha, this, I can't have another cup of wine. I'm not a beer? Yeah, I would love to have a beer. Go for it. Then you could straight up make Havdala on the beer, is what the Bir Halacha says. Pun intended. Now, once again, assuming that we know that beer is Chamar Medina. The Or Litzion, he makes a diak on the Shulchan Aruch. This diak isn't specific to Sfardim, that the first two times that I quoted the Shulchan Aruch, the Mechaber specified by Friday night Kiddush and Shabbos day Kiddush, that if Yayin Eino Maitza, if you don't find any wine, then you could use Chamar Medina. But the Mechaber did not point that out by Havdala, and the Or Litzion wants to say it's much easier to make Havdala on Chamar Medina than by the Kiddush of Friday night and the Kiddush of Shabbos day. This doesn't seem to be the opinion of the Mishnah Berurah, because the Mishnah Berurah says it's only true if Yayin Ein Matzah. But I imagine the Or Litzion has a good diak, and I would suggest that it might be based on the fact that since the Rambam applies the din of Chamar Medina only by Havdala, that gives backing and strength and lichatchilanus to using the Chamar Medina for Havdala above and beyond using Chamar Medina for Kiddush Shabbos morning. We could also misvara say that Havdala is the easier time to use Chamar Medina, because that was the example of the Gemara. I was wondering, the Gemara doesn't discuss what a Meimer did for Kiddush on Shabbos. L'cha'ira, presumably, on Shabbos, a Meimer made Kiddush on wine. It doesn't seem that he made Kiddush on Chamar Medina. It was only Havdala. So once again, we have from the Gemara, there is a hint to the fact that Havdala would be an easier time to use Chamar Medina. Now, one could argue that Havdala should be harder to use Chamar Medina, because we know Havdala is a much more real Kiddush in a way than Shabbos morning. Havdala is a din d'oraisa b'pashtus, whereas Shabbos morning Kiddush is certainly d'Rabbanan. You're not even really being Mekadosh anything. It already is Shabbos. You're just showing the meal's chashiv. So one could have argued that it would be easier to make Kiddush by Shabbos day. And in fact, the Nachal Sheva, he has a Kiddush that he says you can make Kiddush on anything, any food even. Sorry, not any food, any drink. You can make Kiddush on for Shabbos day, because it's just a hecker. It's not a real Kiddush anyways. Moshe Feinstein quotes the Yavitz as saying that you not only any drink, but you can even use any food to make Kiddush Shabbos day. However, Moshe takes big issue with the Yavitz and says it can't be. It's certainly not true, and it must be a misprint, a typo, a mistake. There's no way the Yavitz really said this. Okay. Now, Lemaisa, Tachlis, we hold it's easier to use Chamar Medina for Havdala than it is to use it for Shabbos day. Now, as we've been pointing out, Lemaisa we paskin, you're allowed to use Chamar Medina even for Shabbos day. It might be easier for Havdala, but we allow Chamar Medina for Shabbos day, as we see is the Psak and Mechaber and the Shulchan Aruch. But there's one point that everybody keeps on saying, certainly by the day, debatable by Havdala, but certainly by Shabbos day. It's b'makoyim she'ein yayin matzoi. We see it from the Rishonim, through the Shulchan Aruch, through the Ramah, through the Mishnah Berurah. This leniency and allowance of using Chamar Medina is only and specifically true when there is no wine. But Rabbi say, when is there no wine? Some have the lashon, if there's no wine in the city. Our cities have wine. Most of our houses have wine. Certainly our neighbors have wine. What's this yayin ein matzoi? Has anybody here ever been to a Kiddush? Certainly in America, much less so in Eretz Yisrael. You go to a regular Balabatish neighborhood in America, and you see everybody's making Kiddush on whiskey. What's going on? The Mishnah Berurah says, "B'makom she'yayin matzoi," you are not allowed to make Kiddush on whiskey, on Chamar Medina. What is going on? So the Brach already brings this up, and he says, "Igel t'mua al klal Yisrael." There's it's very strange. What's pshat in the Klal Yisrael that they're making Kiddush on Chamar Medina when we have wine? Now I just want to point out a little history. There were times in history when there really wasn't wine around. If you lived in a cold climate, then they didn't make wine in most cold climates. And transportation, import, export wasn't like it is today. And there are times that you didn't really have wine. But Rabbi said, nowadays we have wine. And even by the Bach, I guess they had wine in the place of the Bach. And it's the Igel T'mua. I don't get it. Why are with what basis are people not using wine and using Chamar Medina? So the question that I want to know is there a heter? So there actually is a marsham who is matter using, actually before I get to the marsham, he's another point as well. Before I get there, I'll use the Rav Yoshev and Rav Vosner have a heter. Doesn't mean that it's necessarily their most lichatchila choice, but they explain a heter. There was a time, let's take ourselves back in history, when wine was the drink that was normally drunk. That's what you normally had. And then you're by drinking something else, you're kind of pushing wine aside. You're saying, I'm not going to take the wine here, and I'm going to take something else instead. Nowadays, we don't drink wine all the time. Wine isn't drunk right and left. We don't have wine by our regular Tuesday lunch. That's not how it is anymore. And therefore, when we go and choose a different drink, it's not a shtach to the wine, so to speak. It's not saying that this meal that I'm having now isn't chashuv and that's why I'm not having wine. There isn't a starting point expectation of having wine anymore. And since there's no longer a starting off expectation of having wine, therefore, other drinks are more standard, classical, expected to drink, and therefore those in their own right are able to make Kiddush on, because we're not bypassing the chashuv to go to the non-chashuv, but rather we're using the drink that is the standard drink of chashivas, or one of the standard drinks of chashivas. But it's not bypassing of the wine, because wine is no longer standard. If wine was standard and we drink wine for Tuesday lunch, then for sure you would not be able to bypass it to go for a different drink. Now, Rav Nissen Karelitz argues with Rav Vosner and Rav Yoshev, and he says, no, mechetesi. The meist of the din is, if there's wine, you can't use something else. There's wine nowadays, and Nissen Karelitz pretty much throws out the Chamar Medina idea for scenarios that you have wine, which are going to be very common. There will be some that you won't. You'll be out of town. We'll discuss, listen, if you don't have anything left in your shelf, you ran out of wine in your house, okay. Certainly during the 9 days is what to talk about. There will be situations that it will be allowed Chamar Medina, but much, much more limited based within the Psak of Nissen Karelitz. Now, furthermore, if we are going to use a Chamar Medina, and as we've been discussing this common Chamar Medina of whiskey, how much of it do you have to drink? So actually, the amount that you have to drink, l'chayra, should be a revius. There's, in Hilchas Kiddush, there is a din of a revius. You need a revius of wine or Chamar Medina to make Kiddush. Why should it be any less when it comes to Chamar Medina, when it comes to whiskey? And the Mishnah Berurah therefore paskins that if you make Kiddush on less than a revius of Chamar Medina, you're not yoitza. Afilu b'diavad, you're not yoitza. And once again, you shouldn't make it a disposable cup, which I don't want to get involved now. The whole discussion, does that work, does it not work? But everybody agrees, l'chatchila, it should be a non-disposable cup. So that's what you should use. Now, what am I talking about? Make Kiddush in a revius of whiskey? Do I look like a drunkard? What are you, crazy? So first of all, the kais needs to be a revius. And I just want to show you, I have to grab a kais over there, what I'm talking about. It's not as much as you think. Hold on. You see this little cup? This little cup. It's just a big shot glass, pretty much. This little cup is a revius. Definitely D'Rabbanan. This is Ramosha's revius, this little cup. 3.3 ounces is all we really need for Ramosha. You can even rely on Chaynan, D'Rabbanan, Kiddush, Shabbos Day. Not necessarily Havdala, but Shabbos Day is when you usually make Kiddush and whiskey. 3 ounces is Rav Chayna, 3.3 Chap Rav Moshe. And all you have to drink is Mali Lugma. Mali Lugma, between 1.5 to 2 ounces, based on the size of the person's cheek. That's got Rabbi Sai. That's what we're drinking anyways. You definitely can't go and take a little sip of the whiskey. That we all agree. That's pashut. So if you're going to really be taking a shot, maybe a little bit of a bigger shot. If you're going to do it, l'chayr, you should be makmid to have a kais that's a revius, 3.3 ounces, and have a malai lugma of the whiskey. Now, is there any heter to have less? So there is a marsham. The marsham says an interesting chiddush, and he wants to say that you could have less than a revius of whiskey. Why? Because there is a taz that says not in Hilchas Kiddush. Taz never said, misconception, the Taz never said this by Kiddush. The Taz said in Hilchas Bar Nefashos that you're allowed to say Bar Nefashos on a shot glass, even though generally we need a revius to say Bar Nefashos, but based on the chashivas of a shot glass of whiskey and the fulfilledness of a shot glass of whiskey, you can make a Bar Nefashos. So the Marsham says, therefore, you can make Kiddush on a shot glass of whiskey. Okay, the Marsham has it, and if it's your minhag, Yesham al lismaich, I guess. So Yesham al lismaich. I'm not here to bash and trash every minhag of Klal Yisrael, and if that's what your father makes some whiskey, I'm not telling you not to. But l'maisa, there's a kind of a shvach heter, because when it comes to Bar Nefashos, l'maisa we don't pass like the Taz. We say you need a revius. And the sushtel is debatable. One could say that a shot glass is fulfilling, and therefore that's why you make a Bar Nefashos. But that doesn't mean that it has the chashivas to make Kiddush on. We don't know that the Taz would have said this by Kiddush, and we don't see anywhere that he did. The sushtel is questionable. So I think we have a dan l'chaf schus for Klal Yisrael. And Rabbi say we're also going to discuss soon the question of whether or not whiskey is Chamar Medina. It's not your minhag to make on whiskey, and certainly on a shot glass of whiskey, Rabbi say don't do it. If it's your minhag, your father does it and your rebbe does it, listen, I'm not here to go against everybody's minhagim. I would say lechatchila, try to get the revius class and do it right. And try to, it shouldn't be disposable either. I'm sorry if I just messed up the next Kiddush. But once again, you could buy big shot glasses. They have it, by the way. You do it. Do it right. I'm not telling you, and I don't want anybody telling me you're getting people drunk. You don't have to drink the whole shot glass. Drink the 1.5 to 2 ounces, which you're going to drink anyways. Okay. That is that. Now, let's get involved to what drinks actually qualify for Chamar Medina. So let's understand, what do you need to qualify for Chamar Medina? So, one thing we see in the examples, wine is wine. It's alcoholic. And beer, which was the replacement of wine, as we saw the Lashon HaMimra. Oh, beer over here. Chamar Medina. It's Chamar Medina? Okay, I'll make Havdala on it. That was also an alcoholic drink. The question is, does it need to be alcoholic? So off the bat, I would want to bring a raya from the fact that we are allowed to make Kiddush on yayin migisai. We're allowed to make Kiddush on wine, freshly squeezed grapes, which, we call, I guess, grape juice. It hasn't fermented yet. And you're allowed to make Kiddush on the grape juice. Rabbi say, anybody here ever got drunk on grape juice? No, I don't think so. So if nobody gets drunk on grape juice and you're allowed to make Kiddush on it, so why in the world would I assume that Chamar Medina needs to be alcoholic? Now one could argue on my raya and say the only reason why we allow yayin mikisai is because it's roya to turn into wine. If you leave it, it will turn into wine. Whereas, orange juice or whatever else we're going to discuss, that will never become alcoholic. But Lamaisa, we see that nowadays we paskin, we allow grape juice. Not everybody does, but Lamaisa, the Mekubal Psak in Klal Yisrael is to allow grape juice. And the grape juice of nowadays is not like the Yayin Megisai of the Gemara, because nowadays grape juice, they take out the chemicals that would eventually turn it into wine. So their old yayin negisa, if you leave it, it would ferment and turn into wine. Our grape juice isn't even roya to ever become wine, and we still allow it to work for Kiddush. So that shows you that certainly we do not have a requirement of alcohol. I'll say further, the Mechaber never says anything, and the Shulchan Aruch Ramah, nobody ever says anything about alcohol. And in fact, I'll bring you a raya. What's the Lashon in the Shulchan Aruch? The Lashon in the Shulchan Aruch is Shecher, Vishar Mashkin, Chutz Min Hamayim. Rabbi say, if you needed alcohol, would it say Chutz Min Hamayim? No. It would say, you need to be alcoholic, and I would understand water was not an option. We wouldn't need to exclude it from the potential options if there was a requirement of alcohol. And don't tell me that's coming to tell me alcohol, because it should have said it much clearer. So it seems to be the pashtus that it does not need to be alcoholic. However, Ravad Yosef paskins, it needs to be alcoholic. The Or L'Tzion says it needs to be alcoholic. So, the Halachas Ketanas, by the way, also says that it needs to be alcoholic. So, whereas the other poskim are okay with it being non-alcoholic, non-intoxicating. So for the Sfardim, it seems pretty clear. Your list of Chamar Medina is going to be relatively short because it has to be alcoholic. For the Ashkenazim, we have a lot more to discuss because it doesn't seem that Chamar Medina needs to be alcoholic at all. Let's go on. So, what else does it need to qualify? So the Rambam says it needs to be what most of the people of the place drink it. The Magen Avraham says most of the people need to drink it most of the time. Whatever exactly that means, because most people aren't drinking anything most of the time. The Mishnah Berurah says it needs to be a drink that's normal to drink. It's ragol ishtos. It has to be a very common drink. The Graz, Baal Tanya, Shulchan Aruch Harav, that's all the same people, by the way. Don't think I'm stacking up shitas. That's one, the Baal Tanya, yeah? The Graz says it's the drink that you have by a meal. A normal mealtime drink. Regular, casual, normal mealtime drink. Dr. Moshe says a Kiddush, seemingly out of left field. What does Moshe say? What qualifies as Chamar Medina? Chamar Medina is the drink that you would serve to a chashuv guest. You have a chashuv guest, a good old friend visiting, the Rosh Hashiva from out of town, the Rav's coming to your house, the president is coming to your house, the wealthy man is visiting, whoever it may be, the chashuv guest, the drink that you'll serve him. The drink, so Ramesh goes further, that isn't drinking because of your thirst. You don't only drink it because you're thirsty. You'll drink it even when you're not thirsty. That, we'll call it special drink. Now, Ramesh just created some problems for us, l'chayra. First of all, where did Ramesh get this from? And now, if we're going to try to be Mekayim, the Graz and Ramesh together, it's almost impossible, because they almost said the opposite of each other. The Graz said, and really the Magen Avraham as well, it's a normal drink that you just have all the time. Whereas Ramesh says it's the special drink that you serve somebody chashuv. Seemingly not the drink that you just drink all the time because you're thirsty. If I want to get both of them, how am I going to do it? Ramesh, where are you coming from? And Ramesh Feinstein, l'chayra, Ramesh, if you were arguing on the Magen Avraham, if you were arguing even more firstly on the Graz, shouldn't you say it? He didn't quote it. He didn't say their opinions and them arguing. He just went, Ramesh went and said his opinion. How are we gonna, where is he coming from? So I heard a mahalach from Shaga Kalis. I think it's a beautiful, beautiful pshat in the Ramesh, and it just strikes emes. He said that, what is the vart of Chamar Medina? Oh, you had no wine here? Is that the Gemara? Is that the Meimar? Oh, so over here, beer is Chamar Medina. Oh, I'll make Kiddush on that. Chamar Medina. It's the drink. It's the wine of the place. Chamar is the lashon of wine. This is the wine of the place. And I'm embellishing Rav Kalas's vart. This is the wine of the place. Chamar Medina has to be the wine replacement. If we step back in history, wine was the drink that they normally drank. Coca-Cola might be old, but it was not that old. So wine was the drink of the place. There weren't many options of drinks. The options pretty much were, you could have wine or you could have beer. Those were the primary options of what there was to drink. And therefore, wine is what you drink during the meal. It's a normal drink. It's what you're always drinking. It's what everybody drinks. Oh, what's the replacement for wine in a place that they don't have wine? The other drink that now everybody drinks that is normal to drink and we drink all the time. Oh, this place, they didn't have wine to drink all the time, so they drink beer all the time. That's the Chamar Medina. Rabbi say, times have changed. That's not how it works anymore. Nobody's sitting and drinking wine on Tuesday lunch. We don't do this anymore. Wine is something that when you have a chush of a guest, you go, let's have a cup of wine together. Oh, we have a simcha, we're at a chasana, let's have a l'chaim, we'll both have a cup of wine. Wine is something to celebrate. Oh, my daughter's engaged, let's celebrate it let me open up this nice bottle of wine to celebrate. That's what wine's for nowadays. So what's Chamar Medina nowadays? It's the replacement of wine. Wine is no longer drinking every meal. It's not here and there and everywhere. Wine is something special for special occasions, for special guests. And nowadays, Chamar Medina needs to be something that you would drink in that special occasion with that special guest. So the translation of Chamar Medina is the same. The understanding of Chamar Medina is the same. Chamar Medina is the replacement of wine. But the wine has changed. The Metzias has changed. The halacha remains true and straight forever and ever. Metzias has changed. And now Chamar Medina is anything. The replacement of the wine. Not anything that you would have to the chashuv guests. Now, let's, and by the way, I think I want to back up Rav Kalis with Rav Yashiv, because Rav Yashiv discussing Yain and Matzai, how it's different nowadays because wine is treated differently, and that affects halacha. I think we could use Rav Yashiv to back up the Kiddush of Rav Kalis and say that wine is different nowadays, and that's going to affect this halacha. Now, let's go on and let's look at the drinks one at a time and say what's Chamar Medina. So whiskey. So whiskey has the quality of alcohol. So Sfardim, you guys are still in. Now, do you serve it to a chashuv guest? I guess so. The might of a chashuv guest will have a chayim together, a special occasion. It depends on your circles a little bit, but I think we could say that we have that. Is it something that's drinking at all times? I hope not. the Munkatcher said, discussing, he said he wanted to paskin that whiskey is no longer Chamar Medina and Munkatch in Hungary. He said, by us, by uns, we don't drink whiskey right and left, and therefore it's not Chamar Medina by us. But I once went to a simcha in Poland, and I heard about the Russians over there. And in Poland, there they drink. There it's Chamar Medina. In Russia, they drink, I imagine you're talking about vodka. There it's Chamar Medina. But by us, in Hungary, it's not Chamar Medina. Who drinks this stuff anymore? Once in a blue moon, that's not Chamar Medina. And the Or L'Tzion says, based on this, sorry, it's not Chamar Medina. But based on the explanation that we had with Ramosha, we still could qualify it as Chamar Medina, and we certainly see that the minhag in many places is to treat whiskey as Chamar Medina. So at the end of the day, it's a shayla, it's a question, but I think halacha we're going to say we will be able to use whiskey as Chamar Medina, and the minhag certainly is to use whiskey as Chamar Medina. It has many of the qualifications. Although it's true it doesn't necessarily have all of them, but if you're a Moshe, it does. What about beer? So beer has a good start. It's the example of the Gemara. It's the example of the Shulchan Aruch. So it certainly historically, many places had the din of Chamar Medina. Furthermore, Sfardim, you're still good. It's intoxicating. So it has that advantage too. Now, is beer drinking all the time? I think nowadays beer is, that would be hard to say. I think beer is not drinking, definitely not by From Yidden. I don't think people drink it all the time. I remember I was once giving a shir in Chamar Medina to a bunch of old Israeli men in my broken Hebrew. And I was saying the same idea. I don't think it's Chamar Medina, how often do people drink beer? And they were all telling me, you don't know, in Eretz Yisrael before 1980, before Coca-Cola showed up, there were three types of drinks. There was wine, beer, water. In beer, they called it white beer and dark beer, which was like regular beer and malt beer. We don't touch that stuff, really. But those were the drinks, and that's all there was. And therefore, regular Tuesday supper, if you wanted to have something besides water, you wanted to have something with a little flavor, a little taste with your supper, you drink a beer. And that's how it was. And I gave a grace to shkoyach to these older men for explaining me this, because now I understood how all the older Israeli poskim were all saying, Chamar Medina, Chamar Medina, Chamar Medina. But I think it's not as pashut anymore. I know even when I came to Eretz Yisrael originally 20 years ago. So you went to Chasana. I remember two things from the Chasana. I remember the people smoking at the table by the Chasana from America. That was very strange to me. And I remember they were serving beer. By all the Chasanas, they served beer. Because that was the normal drink. That was the minhag. That's how it was. Nowadays, it's not true. Yeah, you might have some Chasanas that at the bar, one of the options of what you could get is beer. But it's not the standard drink that's served at the table, and therefore, I think it's not as pashut as it once was. And now, let's think about further. The serving to distinguished guest. I don't think if your Rosh Yeshiva showed up, you're going to serve him a beer. I don't think if the president showed up, you'd serve him a beer. So, I don't know if it's so simple to say that's something that you serve a chashuv guest. However, I would counter, maybe you would. Maybe you won't give the Rosh Yeshiva, but your good friend that you haven't seen for a bunch of years, you meet him at the Yarchikala. We're back together at the Yarchikala. You'll have a beer with him as an act of a chashuv drink. So it's a little bit hard to say. I think it depends. There is a degree of chashuv guest that you would have a beer with, and there's a degree of chashuv guest that once you get to that high chashuv, you probably wouldn't have a beer with them. I think there's what to debate. Let's hear what the poskim say. So the Aruch HaShulchan already said that beer is not drink enough to be considered Chamar Medina. The Meister of Shlomo Zalman says it's good. Rav Scheinberg says it's good. The Or L'Tzion says it's a good Chamar Medina. The Gra actually used beer for Havdala on Matzah Pesach. Rav Nissen Karelitz says, Rabbi Isai, you're not with the times. Nowadays in Eretz Yisrael, it is no longer Chamar Medina. As I said a minute ago, personally, I'm skeptical to use beer as Chamar Medina because I don't really think it's something drinking so often, and I also don't think it's debatable whether you would serve it to a chashuv guest. What about coffee? So this is a fun topic. So I would argue coffee has a lot going for it. Remember I told you that the Graz and the Ramosha were almost the stira? Well, I think we might have coffee might solve the day. Because is it something that you drink normally all the time? Outside of water, I think coffee is the most drunk drink in the world. It's very normal. People have 2 coffees a day. Is super normal. People have a coffee at the end of the meal, if it's a milk meal, or without. Sure, very often, very normal. It is as normal of a drink as you could find, seemingly after water. While it's also true that if you want to serve something to a guest, you have a chashuv guest, you make him a coffee. Very normal. You want to go out with a friend, let's go out for a coffee. Let's go to Starbucks. Not getting involved in the kashrus, that's a different talk. Let's go to Starbucks, we'll have a coffee. Super normal. Let's go to a cafe for coffee. Right? Normal. I think it fits the Ramosha and the Graz. The Meiser of El Yoshev says if it's something that's served by Simchas, then it counts as Chamar Medina. I think if we go to a fancy milk bris, there will always be coffee at the bris. And therefore, l'chayr it should be good. The Brisker Rav and Rav Chaim Oizer were both, when there was no wine around, they both would make Havdala on coffee. Now, the Rosham Zalman, by the way, points out that you could only do it if it's hot. As the coffee needs to be hot to make Havdala or Kiddush on the coffee. I don't think Rosham Zalman would say that nowadays. Rosham Zalman was around in the pre-ice coffee era. So I think if you have a Geschmacka iced coffee, I'm not talking about the slush that they have in Eretz Yisrael in some places. I'm talking about, a nice coffee with ice cubes in it, a nice Geschmacka iced coffee, where I think that would be perfectly fine to make Havdala on or make Kiddush on as well. Warmish coffee, that would probably be a problem. But I'm still not convinced because I think once we have the iced coffee on the cold side, the hot coffee on the hot side, I'm still not convinced that warm coffee is canceled out nowadays. But I would stay away as caution. But let's we don't want it to be cold, warm. We should have it nice and hot. Now, there's also to point out that if it's, and the Brisker Rav mentions this, that if it's too hot and you can't drink a revius in the shir, in the zman, that it takes to drink, then that's a problem as well. So you can't have it piping hot. So you make the coffee, you wait 3, 4, 5 minutes, let it cool down a little bit, don't burn your tongue, and have Havdala that way. Or Aitaina, that you should be allowed to have it on the iced coffee as well. Now, Rav Nissen Karelitz says that you're only allowed to make Havdala or Kiddush on coffee. It only counts as Chamar Medina if it's black without milk. I don't understand this at all. I don't know Pshat. I didn't find the Chut Shani in the Beis Medrash that I was preparing this, and therefore I didn't get a chance to see it inside. I only saw it quoted in the Dirshu, but from what I saw quoted, I don't get it. It doesn't make any sense to me. But apparently that's what Rav Nissen Karelitz says. I'm sure there's a very good reason. I don't get it. Okay. Now, there's Ramosha, one discussing coffee. He's actually not very thrilled with coffee. He wants to say that you probably shouldn't be allowed, there's as far as to say you shouldn't be allowed to make Havdala on coffee. It shouldn't count as Chamar Medina because it's just colored water. What is coffee already? It's water, you put some color in it, and some black stuff, and now you have coffee. It's just colored water. It's not the chutz min hamayim, it is mayim. And therefore maybe you shouldn't be allowed to. And therefore Moshe says you're only allowed to use coffee b'shas hadchak. I don't know if I really understand that. Why is it just water? It's coffee. But okay, let's keep on going. We'll see. We'll get some clarity as we go. The Mechsi Elio, here's the good kasha. Anybody here ever have? I'm just putting my own words. Allow me. Anybody here ever got coffee from Starbucks? Anybody here ever got coffee on a plane? Now, was the person behind the counter by Starbucks, were they Jewish? Was the stewardess on the plane Jewish? No. How could you have the coffee? Surely it was bishul akam. Surely it was cooked by a guy. How could you have a coffee that was cooked by a guy? Bishul akam. Answer: No. Bishul akam doesn't really apply here. It's just water. Oops. Wait a second. So, by Bishul Akam, we're going to say it's just water, and over here we're going to say it's not just water. It's a little bit of a problem. And, by the way, just there, this is the reason why some people would be makbid not to have the coffee by Starbucks and on the plane. But that's going to be for a different discussion. Maybe one week we'll discuss Bishul Akam. But for this week, that's a good kasha. Why is that? So, it's a taina against coffee, and we'll discuss it more in a minute. What about tea? Could you consider tea to be Chamar Medina? So the Mishnah Berurah says, not in Hilchos Chamar Medina. The Mishnah Berurah says, discussing Pesach after the Afikomen, you're allowed to have tea. Now, why not? Why are you allowed to have tea? If it's Chamar Medina, we know after the Daled Kaisis, you can't have another cup of wine. You can't have another something that could potentially be a replacement of a cup of wine. And if tea was possible to be Chamar Medina, you would not be allowed to have tea. So from the fact that the Mishnah Berurah says you're allowed to have tea, that proves that tea is not a Chamar Medina. Why? Why not? Why is it not a Chamar Medina? Because it's just colored water. What is tea already? It's just colored water. And I would add, there are poskim, when we discussed Ein Tzaveh Ba'ichlin and Hilchos Shabbos, there are poskim that don't want to allow making tea, even with tea essence, to pour into a cup of clear water, because you're being seveya. Oh, what do you mean ain't seveya b'ayichlin? Yeah, but over here the whole thing is it's just coloring water. It's not really even a big food in its own right. I've always had a problem understanding those shitas. But we say tea, it's just colored water. And therefore it cannot be Chamar Medina. What about soda? So most of the poskim do not allow soda. I know Scheinberg allows it, but most of the poskim do not allow soda, and we say it is just colored water. Actually, to note, I don't know if this is true by soda in general, but I heard that Rav Gifter used to make Havdala on ginger ale every week. Now, in America, I don't know how it was 25 years ago in America. I don't remember. But in America, you buy it, for $2 a bottle of soda, Pepsi, or for $2 a bottle of ginger ale. In Eretz Yisrael, I don't know what it is now. I'm not up to date in prices post Gezeris Lieberman, but the way that it used to be is a bottle of soda was like 6 shekel, and a bottle of ginger ale was like 13. For some reason, ginger ale was like twice the price. So I don't know if there's like a greater level of chashivas in ginger ale versus other drinks. In America, there isn't. In Eretz Yisrael, there is. I don't know the reason why that is the case. But apparently Rav Gifter would make Havdalah on ginger ale every week. But most poskim say soda does not count. It is just colored water. What about juices? 100% pure juice. Orange juice. So let's think about it. Alcoholic? No. Sorry, Sfardim. What about, is it something that's drinking normally? Yeah, orange juice is very normal drink in America. Would you serve a chashav a guest? L'chayra, you give him a cup of orange juice. That's actually doing pretty good. Is it a very common drink? Yeah, I think orange juice is very common. Is it water? Nope, not water. L'chayra, orange juice has, in America, almost lots and lots of the milas, and l'chayra, orange juice would qualify as a Chamar Medina in America. What about in Eretz Yisrael? So they have all this like pre-got concentrate colored water stuff. they already have shot colored water, but 100% pure fresh squeezed orange juice. They have it. It exists, but it's not a very common drink. Most people do not have it in their fridge. Why not? Probably because it's expensive, and therefore it never took on in the culture in Israel, in Eretz Yisrael. So, l'chayra, it doesn't, would you serve it to a chashuv guest? I don't know, maybe if you thought of it, but it probably wouldn't be in your fridge. Is it drinking all the time? No. Is it alcoholic? No. I heard it's not water. Doesn't sound so convincing to use the orange juice as Chamar Medina and Eretz Yisrael. But I want to point out that Rav Yashiv said you could use orange juice as Chamar Medina, even in Eretz Yisrael, because he used the Vard and he worked with the same type of idea as Rav Moshe, seemingly. It has to be a chosh of a drink. Fresh squeezed orange juice is a chosh of a drink. Oh, so why don't people have it? Because it's expensive. If they would sell a bottle of fresh squeezed orange juice for 6 shekel, then everybody would be drinking it. The reason that they don't drink it is because it's too expensive, not because it's not chashuv. And really, it is a chashuv a drink. I think most of the poskim in Eretz Yisrael do not go along with this Reb Yashiv, as far as I know. But I guess b'shas tzchak, if you have Reb Yashiv, you have Reb Yashiv. But in America, it should be fine. Over here, not pashut. One last word that I want to just talk about, this idea of what's considered a colored water and what's not. So we seem to be saying, Lefi Roy Paiskim, we seem to be Xing tea. Tea is no good. Soda is no good. Coffee is good. Beer is good. Wine is good. I mean, obviously. But really, wine is, most is 3 parts water, 1 part wine. And beer is obviously 98% water. And everything else is water. Coffee's water, tea's water. It's all 99% of the ingredients to all the stuff is water. So when do we decide what's colored water and what's a proper drink? There is something in me that I feel like coffee is more than just water. Coffee is more than just tea. It has that caffeine, that quality, that thickness. It wakes you up. It's a something. But I'll be honest, I have a very hard time being megaderate what specifically it is. I have a very difficult litmus test that I could apply. And beer, what is it? Yeah, beer it has hops. It has all the stuff that go into it. It has like more of a life, more of a thickness to it. But I think maybe that thickness might help. That it's not, tea is very thin, whereas coffee is a much thicker liquid, not maybe a little bit thicker. So maybe that's what helps to be more than just colored water. But I do admit I am struggling a little bit with this idea. But I think Lamaisa, to conclude, if you want to use whiskey as Chamar Medina, you could, but use revis l'chatchila. If you want to use beer, a lot of the poskim say you could, but a lot of those poskim lived 30 years ago. I'm not as convinced personally. If you want to use coffee, the Meister Moshe wasn't so happy with it. Not everybody's so happy with it. The pashtus is, and I think if most poskim, coffee would be a valid Chamar Medina. If you want to use orange juice in America, you're good. Once again, with coffee and orange juice, I'm going to add as long as you're not Sephardi. If you're Sephardi, these aren't going to be good options for you. And if you want to use soda, I forgot to mention milk. Milk is not Chamar Medina, even though there are some earlier poskim that seem to discuss whether it is. It isn't. Seltzer, that I think we could all agree is water. And obviously water is water, and that won't work. And that is it for Chamar Medina. Have an amazing week.